At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Pichert. Dr. Pichert is an educational psychologist with special interests in learning and instruction. He is professor of medical education and administration at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine, where he's been a faculty member since 1979. Seems like he went right out of college there. Dr. Pichert's MS and PhD, both in education, were earned at the University of Illinois, and to my surprise and my pleasure, he got his bachelor's degree at my alma mater, Bucknell. So we're both Bisons, so I do have a lot to learn from him today. Dr. Pichert has conducted extensive research in promoting health professional-patient relation interactions. His work over the past 15 years is focused on identifying metrics and methods that address unnecessary variation in behavior and performance that undermine a healthcare organization's culture of safety. He and his colleagues have translated those metrics and methods into local risk management initiatives nationally and at Vanderbilt, and he's developed benchmark profiles that will help us progress from here. Jim has published more than 150 articles in education and health-related journals, presented his research at many scientific meetings, and received several awards. Dr. Pichert and his colleagues developed the PARS program to train peer messengers to use evidence-based, peer comparative profile data during interventions of high-risk colleagues. Jim has presented many workshops for healthcare leaders throughout the United States on strategies for promoting professionalism, accountability, and communicating about adverse outcomes and errors. So at this time, I'd like to have us have a warm welcome to Dr. Jim Pichert, who will be our keynote speaker for this morning. Thank you.
Dr. Cohen, thanks very much for that kind introduction. Mr. Friedman, great start. Susan, thank you for your organizing. I'm back here in the back because you were all assigned to tables, and I've learned in all of my years of making presentations at continuing education meetings in medicine and nursing that the best questions, dogfights, commentaries, and challenges come from the back of the room. And so I asked that you be assigned to these tables. And I look forward to having some conversation with you. You will see that there are microphones spaced throughout the room. And so I do expect to have a fair amount of interaction and engagement with you during the course of this presentation. Now, Dr. Cohen introduced me as having a PhD in education and all those other things, and that was very kind of you to work through all that. But that's not how my mother-in-law, who is from the Pittsburgh area, used to introduce me when I first got to Vanderbilt in 1979 in the medical school. She loved to introduce me as, "This is my son-in-law, Jim. He's a doctor." And then with due respect to those of you who are mothers-in-law, she would proceed to say, "Yeah, he's a doctor, but not the kind that can help you." And so perhaps over the last 34 years, I have had the opportunity to have some motivation to maybe, just maybe, do something practical. I do want to say thanks very much for the people who have done so many practical things here at Einstein, mostly Kelly. Kelly, you deserve a round of applause, I'll tell you. Does it work? And so Kelly and her team have just done a remarkable job of putting all this together. You know, I got here about noon yesterday, and they were already at work putting together all these tables. They were making sure that everything worked, and I just really appreciate it. I also want to say thank you to all the COOs in here. Ruth Lefton, thank you so much for the work that you've done putting all these things together. Oh, there was one applause. That's really good. It was so nice of you to bring your mom. Yeah, well, it was nice of you to bring your mom. Think of a project that you're working on. Dr. Zuckerman told me that you're working on lots of different quality, safety, risk reduction programs. You're trying to enhance the patient experience. I mean, for goodness sakes, who isn't these days? And we're all struggling with that. We're all struggling with the number of quality and safety risk initiatives being thrown at us, right? It's really tough. And so you have internal desires to do the right thing. You have external mandates to do more and more with less and less. And so how are we going to accomplish all this stuff? It's pretty daunting. And as leaders, you know the fatigue that comes with so many of the challenges you face day in and day out. I'm going to be talking about this business that was part of the introduction of reducing unnecessary variation. Unnecessary variation. It's going to be one of the themes you're going to hear more and more and more about during the course of the next probably decade. It's about promoting reliability. You're hearing all about the high reliability organizations. And various folks mean different things by that, but I'll tell you, these seem to be the characteristics that are coming out in the literature more and more. Number one is vision, core values, goals. You have those. EHN is famous, I will tell you, even in Nashville, Tennessee. I've learned to say y'all without blushing. Got in the car when my kids were teenagers, and 10 of the station presets were to country music channels, and I was aghast. Having grown up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, it's really an honor to be back here. Dad used to bring me to Phillies games at Connie Mack Stadium. Anyone here remember Connie Mack? A few, all right. Very good. Well, haven't had a good year this year, but I still root for it. And congrats to the Eagles. You know, we have the Titans in Tennessee. They ain't much Titans, but they are named that anyway. The first thing is leadership, authority that's modeled. You are the leaders. You have more authority than you probably recognize. And it comes from that modeling during rounding. And then a safety culture. Oh my goodness, we hear so much about a safety culture, but fundamentally it's a willingness to speak up, to report and address issues that arise when things aren't going well. Think of that project that you've got going now that seems to be ready to launch. Are you sure? Are you working on a project for a while and it has stalled short of the goal? What do you do? Those are some of the things I'd like to chat with you about today, because we face that stuff too. And the psychological safety, the trust in an organization for speaking up, and no repercussions for good faith reporting, just really essential. And this includes our patients too. Mr. Friedman mentioned how important the patient experience, or by whatever name you give it, patient satisfaction, patient engagement, goes by lots of names. But we have got to make sure that our patients, our families, the folks who walk through our doors, who are the eyes and ears of our organization, have an opportunity to share with us their observations. I was so inspired walking in to see the things that patients were saying about EHN that were flashed up on the screen. Did you see those nice comments? How many of those nice comments does it take to overcome the loyalty of a patient who had a bad experience? We can talk about the marketing literature later, but you know that if you have one negative, it can just undo an awful lot of other very positive comments that are made during the course of our patients' visits. So I want to start by getting a little bit of audience participation. At your seats, you should find one of these keypads. They're not calculators. We're going to do some audience polling in a moment. Pick those up. And here's the case. I need your advice. Now, Dr. Zuckerman told me that you had been talking a lot at the last LDI and even before then in his infectious diseases days. It was all about taking care of folks who'd come down with infections. But like most of us, we don't want those to happen. And so at Vanderbilt, a large southeastern academic medical center that will remain unnamed, have had a real challenge with hand hygiene. And I'll tell you that we spent an awful lot of time doing the physical engineering of the placement of the foam dispensers. We made sure that there were ease of use, lots of instruction. But every once in a while, there were challenges like this one. Here in your leadership role, an event's reported to you through an event reporting system, and the policy defines that you review and you follow up. It turns out that a nurse observes that Dr. General Internal Medicine enters an exam room without foaming in, proceeds to touch an area with pus, says, I offered a pair of gloves. Dr. Jim took them, and with me and the patient watching, just dropped them in the trash. Think of your quality safety project. You have policies, you have training, you have tools, you even have a few meager resources. And then Dr. Pichert says, I'm not doing that, that's stupid. Why do I need to do that? Show me a randomized controlled trial in my practice area that says this prevents one infection. The skeptics are among us. And that's okay, we need them. We need them to challenge us. But this is something that by policy and by leadership agreement is going to be who we are. We are going to wash our hands. And so this is a report encouraged by the leadership. And so let me ask you a question. In your microsystem, however you define it, your facility, your unit, your group, what percentage of the time would someone report this event to a responsible party through an established reporting system or directly to somebody? And what I would ask that you do is take this clicker. Oh, being in Philadelphia and being here in Pennsylvania, I should recognize that some of you are used to having more than one vote. So if there is an extra clicker nearby, I trust you will know what to do with it. And so I may need a moment to make sure this is working properly, but I want you to think about, you should be able to vote at any time. Just point up in this general direction and press the button associated with your vote. And Kelly, you were right. We're going to need to reset this real quickly. It'll just take a moment, so bear with me. Good interruption, but I think some of you actually appreciated the opportunity to stretch after sitting for an hour or so. Back to the story. The story is that a nurse observes that Dr. Pichert, will say, dropped the gloves in the trash without using them during an examination of a patient who had some prurient drainage. So pick up your clickers, please. All you need to do is click one of the buttons, and in a moment I will give you a 10-second countdown, but we've already got 96 people who have voted, and that's really good. But keep voting. All you do is press the button. By the way, you can press the button as many times as you like. The only vote that counts is the last one before this 10-second countdown concludes. So keep pressing the buttons. Is there anyone without one of the clickers? We'll get you one because there's some extras around the tables at places where folks aren't seated. So, all right, leaders, this is very interesting, isn't it? And by the way, this is pretty typical of the responses that I get anywhere in the country. Take a look. What percentage of the time would someone speak up and say something about this event? Even though it's not consistent with policy, it's not consistent with the hand hygiene guidelines promulgated by CDC and others. There are just lots of challenges in the way, and it's not always something that can be done by housekeeping and engineering. To make it easy, sometimes there are folks who present us with unnecessary variation in behavior and performance, right? Well, it looks like, in this case, 50% or more think that this would likely be reported less than half the time. Now, a quarter of you think it'll be reported most of the time. If you don't hear about it, not much you can do about it, is there? Let me ask you another question. If it was reported that Dr. Jim, as in Jim Pichert, Dr. Jim, what percentage of the time would a medical leader have a follow-up conversation with Dr. Jim? What percentage of the time? 0 to 20, 80 to 100? Again, please click your vote. By the way, these clickers, they will not change the channel on your TV or open your garage door. My wife keeps trying to point one at me and find a mute button. It doesn't happen. But now you have 10 seconds left to complete your vote. Please signal your vote. Just like was said earlier, we want to have everybody responding to these questionnaires. Oh my. If it were reported, what you're telling me is that if I'm the one who dropped the gloves in the trash right in front of the patient and in front of the nurse who tried to help me do the right thing, if it were reported, half of the time it's unlikely that a medical leader would have a conversation with me. There would be lots of other things that might happen, and I guess that's what keeps Dr. Zuckerman's infectious diseases colleagues in business. But are we going to make real progress on our quality and safety initiatives if we're not willing to report any unnecessary variations from the plan? And are we going to make any progress if we don't talk with one another, not just as we often do in Nashville, about one another? You know, as an outsider looking in on your professions, I just see the professionals talking about one another far more sometimes than with one another. And so today, if we're really going to be serious about promoting the patient experience, making sure that our community reputation is even better tomorrow than it is today, if we really want to promote safety, quality, and a great culture that you have, the question is, can it be made just a little bit better?